Morning.
Good morning.
Oh, man, it is the end of our second week today.
That's
That means
crazy.
we have 6 weeks left. It goes crazy fast. It's like, huh? Can that be? I think so.
I haven't had a summer class in so long.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've always either taken them or taught them. Um, Not at 9 in the morning. Mine are usually either at night or afternoons. But
Mm.
this summer I wanted to do mornings. Because during the regular school year, I teach at 9. So, but yeah, it's like, oh, no summer vacation till July. But that's all right. We'll
Yeah.
get through it. And humanities is always kind of fun because there's so much
Mhm.
art and good information. So, yeah.
That's true.
All righty.
Recording.
8:59. Eventually, I think they're going to let us in our classrooms uh, in the new education building around middle of June. And we only have like 3 weeks by then, but I think I'm going to go uh, and teach from the classroom and just see how it goes a couple times this summer. But I'll let you guys know when I'm over there. Today, we're going to see some artwork. We're going to see some videos from famous movies about the Greeks. So you can kind of get more visuals. The PowerPoints and videos are quite good, and we'll continue with those. So you get reinforced from the good photos and the visuals and the maps in your textbook. Um, and so we'll spend the first half of today's class wrapping up the Greeks. And then before we take our break, we will look at examples of the Native American paper that's due June 18th. Those topics are due on the Excel sheet. And then how they make their presentation for class. So it's important to look at an example of a paper, one that was done well, and then how the writer took uh, a couple facts from the paper, brought copy and pasted it over to her PowerPoint, and then added images. And so the agenda for today is to wrap up the Greeks, this chapter 2, and then through lots of art and videos and outstanding works, a little bit on philosophy, because we can't omit those guys. And I've seen that some of you have already done some of the homework for the Greeks. That's awesome. Just kind of stay ahead of the curve. Um, and then the second half of class will get into the Roman period. And the Romans did copy quite a bit from the Greeks, but then they also did other things that added to the fundamentals of the Greek civilization and what was learned and unlearned and relearned. And you'll find that um, in the textbook and the choices that they make for an intro to humanities class for what to study. All right, so again, that's the plan. We'll wrap up with some good visuals of the Greeks, some videos, some PowerPoints, and then I'm going to show you an example of a Native American artist paper. I've got lots of them. We used to build the documents and then all post them all together on a website, and I'm not doing that this summer. But we're going to go to a website and then just see examples of what students have produced. And then from the writing, then how they make their presentation. and it should be quite simple because the writing is already done about the artist. And so we'll do that. And usually with that grade, by, if you get it done by June 18th, it really does solidify for the credits that you're after. But if you don't take care of the projects, it does hurt in the total points. So I did want to show you some examples. So before we see each other again, which will be next Monday, you kind of have a visual of what the project's about instead of running around and saying you don't know when it's been shown to you as an example in class. So that's going to be accomplished today, because I know as a student, I like to see models. I like to see examples. Then we'll take our break, and then we'll start in with chapter 3, the Romans, with some new materials. And then, oh yeah, we do have memorial off. That's right. So we won't get together till next Wednesday. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of showing you an example. I thought I really need to show them what one looks like so you have an idea. Yeah, you're right. No class on Monday. We have memorial off, and that's posted, I hope, in the calendar. So thanks for catching that. All right, we're going to go into the Greeks, the materials. And as you can see, I've kind of gone to places to get information, and I keep building. This morning, I found another new PowerPoint with the artworks from chapter 2. Most of the videos that I collected last year are pretty brief, but they give a nice overview of particular eras. We looked at that PowerPoint yesterday. Now we're going to go to Greek and Roman art. I'm going to copy and paste the video just in case some of you don't have it accessible, but it usually works in my other classes. So I'm just thinking, well, maybe some of you are on phones. I don't argue. But that's the one we'll watch first. And I'll just kind of go through the line of links and PowerPoints so that we get more supplemental visual of the Greeks.
Patori here, but you can call me Art. This is Explorations in Art History, starring me and the hand. Well, what about the rest of me? You. People watching from around the world, and I'm stuck waiting on some five-fingered prima donna. Oh, okay. Well, that's better. Woo! That Mediterranean wind feels pretty breezy. It looks like we'll be talking about the Greek and Roman period. Leave it to the Greeks to turn geometry into art. 1000 to 700 BC marked a period in Greek art called the geometric period because of the decorations on the pottery of the day. Simple geometric designs were combined into a repeating pattern that circled the pot. Later, abstract figures of animals and people appeared. They used pots for storing wine and oil, for eating and drinking, as prizes at athletic games, and even as burial markers. Start as a tot, end as a pot. Hey, it was a joke. Let me out. Here. Guys. In the Archaic period, their art began to move toward more realistic portrayals of the figure. From the Egyptians, Greeks learned the trick of adding hair down the back of their marble statues to give strength to the neck area, and spreading the stance of the legs to give a statue stability. Ow! Too much stability! Male statues were called kouros, and the females, kourē. Greek pottery styles changed as well. They created the popular black figure wear style, which showed black figures on red pots. And then they reversed the formula into another popular style called red figure wear, showing red figures against a black background. Red figure or black? Which one makes me look thinner? Greece, however, wasn't one big happy country at the time. Instead, they had several Greek city-states. The two top dogs, Athens and Sparta were often at odds, jockeying for position and power, until the Persians attacked in 480 BC. Then Athens and Sparta dropped their differences for the moment, and together they repulsed the invaders. But not before Persia had done some serious damage to the city of Athens. It was time for the Athenians to rebuild. Surging with confidence after their triumph over the Persian Empire, the Greeks launched into a golden age called the Classical period. Pericles, the leader of Athens, ordered the rebuilding of the temples on the Acropolis, where the famous sculptor Phidias decorated the Parthenon, a temple dedicated to Athena, the founding goddess of Athens. Classic sculptures became more realistic and at the same time idealistic. Sculptors like Polykleitos searched for the mathematically perfect proportions of human beauty. Poses became more natural by using principles like contrapposto, a pose that gave an elegant balance to the figure by shifting the angles of the shoulders to the pelvis. Using the ratio of the size of the head to the body, Greek artists discovered that the average male or female has a proportional height of 6.5 to 7 heads. By increasing the size of the body to the head, they discovered a more visually appealing proportion. Even today, comic book artists use these idealized proportions to draw superheroes. Art will smash! Yeah! In 336 BC, Alexander the Great took power and spread the Greek Empire from Egypt to the borders of India. His death ended the Classical period. In the Hellenistic period, Greek sculptors still popped out amazingly lifelike sculptures, but now they added more emotion and action, like poor Laocoon and his two sons being strangled by two giant snakes sent by the gods as punishment. The sculptor Praxiteles broke the long Greek tradition of portraying male subjects in the nude and the females clothed with his Aphrodite of Knidos, which became the first nude woman. More Roman copies were made of this Greek sculpture than any other. The idea of empire appealed to the Romans too, and in 214 BC, they took control of Greece. The Romans loved Greek culture. They copied Greek statues, paintings, and architecture. They even adopted the Greek gods, though they renamed them all. Zeus, meet Jupiter. Poseidon, meet Neptune. Aphrodite, meet Venus. The Romans, though, were much more interested in portraiture of real people. Instead of seeking the ideal, they sought for a true likeness of their subject. Warts and all. Also, Romans used art as propaganda to promote a political agenda and glorify emperors and their exploits. Emperor Augustus had himself portrayed as a strong young military leader in his warrior's breastplate, even though he was much older at the time. Kind of like some people's Facebook picture. Trajan's column is like movie scenario in stone, the sculpted scenes depicting Roman battles and their ultimate victory. Roman architects became masters of the arch and the dome. The arch was a huge innovation for the creation of bridges and aqueducts. And the dome became the staple of big official buildings, like the Pantheon, which became one of the most influential buildings in Western architecture. The expansion of the Roman Empire spread Greek and Roman ideas throughout Europe, which formed the foundation of Western culture. Even today, we are still influenced by ideas developed in ancient Greece and Rome.
Okay, in the chat, I'd like you to write the following from the video.
I have a question, Jane.
Uh-huh.
One of the sculptures had snakes in it, and on page 35, they say that snakes were vanishing snakes symbolizing or symbols rebirth.
Uh-huh.
So that it confuses me along with that statue that they showed in there.
Right.
Yeah, because our last meeting we talked about snakes in the one of the sculptures, and it was what was it was the snake with a creature or something like that. So it's
Right.
almost kind of contradictory about, they say it's about rebirth, but you know what I mean?
Well, and your symbols for any animal will have variety. So because one may symbolize rebirth, there may be another piece of art where the snake may be of fertility and the future generations. And then sometimes a snake is a symbol of medicine,
Mhm.
because in the Hippocratic Oath in most doctors' offices, when they've graduated, they have those symbols of the snakes going up.
Mhm.
And that's about healing and medicine. But in medicine, we always know it doesn't always work. And then snakes can also be a symbol of death if it's poisonous, if it's the asp that Cleopatra, uh, you know, where they committed suicide in Egyptian times, they would put an asp to a person's neck to kill them because of the poison. So symbols don't have to be locked in stone in
Okay.
art. And that's one of the graces of the humanities, is that if you get some background knowledge of these particular pieces of art, you'll just take those different works, and they may have a variety of meanings. In
Okay.
the book, they're pretty clear about symbolic meanings, but that's kind of the variety that they give you. For me, as a student of the humanities, there's always another question. So that's good. Okay, so from the video, what is one takeaway from each of you? And we do record the class. I saved the chats. They copied their gods, but renamed them. Yeah, and so you're going to see that shift from Greek to Roman. Latea says she likes the red and black art on the pottery, and how their sculptures changed in time to be more lifelike. Yeah, just with postures. Because, you saw the side and then the full frontal with Egyptian. And you did see that at the beginning of Greek. And then all of a sudden, they're giving lifelike poses. And it's kind of cool with the use of anatomy. One takeaway was the size of the sculptures. Exactly. Because when our little kids today look at their superheroes and cartoons and videos and figures that you can buy at Target or Super Walmart, wherever you go, they make it 8 feet tall. And like when I told you guys that when I went into the Institute of Art in Chicago, it was like, whoa, they were really tall. And so instead of 6 foot, they're 8 to 9 feet. And so they're revered and they're majestic.
That's awesome.
Um, it is. I mean, it's just like earth shattering when you start looking that at the time they were done, and then how we have evolved. Okay. And because this video was about both Greek and Roman, it's going to tie them together because you're going to see lots of similarities. Now I'm going back into the View the Greeks. This is another video from Khan Academy. We got a couple of those today. And then we'll watch one about the philosophers, because each one of those guys, we mentioned them briefly on Monday, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. It's going to give you more background from what the textbook gave you in the writing. We did cover the myth of Oedipus and scene 1 of Antigone. And then the key question is, and the Greeks don't want you to answer this. This is a rhetorical question. This is an individual answer. Would you bury your brother who was out in the public
Yes.
square or not? And everyone's going to have a different answer for that one. As I told you guys, I've had classes that put their answers on little sticky notes and then I collect them. They put either a Y for yes or an N for no. And I've had almost complete classes, not at tribes, where most will just leave the body.
Huh.
And it could be the age
Interesting.
of who answered, you know, how old they were, could be the gender, but also it tells you a little bit about where they're coming from with their thought processes.
I would have
Um,
buried my brother.
yeah. And then we're gonna watch a scene from Troy. There's a movie called Troy. It's pretty long, but the special effects are pretty cool, and it kind of brings us there. And you got to realize that Troy, the story of Helen of Troy, who leaves her husband to go have a fling with Paris, creates a huge war. And the movie Troy talks about that war that this one woman created.
Is that
And
with Brad Pitt?
yeah, and
Right.
the myth is about how beautiful Helen was. She was so beautiful, and the artwork that we see throughout the ages, she's many times mentioned in poetry that she is a face that launched 1,000 ships. And we will watch that particular scene. So you see all these warriors coming because of this one woman. And then there are other films about ancient Greece. Of course, the famous god Hercules became a fairly decent film with special effects with The Rock a couple years ago. And then we'll review the chapter, look at the death masks, the architecture, the gods and the goddesses. And then I do have one more PowerPoint with more art. And so we're going to continue on and go to.
Should we be printing these on PowerPoints?
No,
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 okay.
no.
All right.
They're really nice for review purposes, though, especially at the end of the class when you get to kind of pick and choose art pieces that you remember and are drawn to. Okay, we saw this one. So we'll go to this one is. Some of them might be the same. Yep, those are the same ones. So. And I will, for those of you who say you can't hear, I will copy and paste this one in the chat again, which I didn't have to do last time, but I can do it. And then this one's about the philosophers. So if you're interested in philosophy at all, we have remaining works from these three top philosophers from the Greek civilization. And they're still mentioned in a lot of philosophy classes today, as well as sociology and psychology. I use Aristotle in my speech class in my persuasion unit. So they're still used quite a bit in other classes, not just humanities.
Was not even a cohesive empire. It was made up of many city-states led by Athens and Sparta. But despite its fragmentation, it's made innumerable contributions to not just Western civilization, but civilization as a whole. And those are contributions in terms of forms of governance like democracy, contributions in medicine, contributions in the arts, in mathematics, in the sciences. But perhaps their most famous contribution is in terms of philosophy. And if you're going to talk about philosophy in ancient Greece, the most famous three philosophers are Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Now, before we get into the first of them, and really the teacher of Plato, who is then the teacher of Aristotle, let's get a little bit of context on this time period. So as we enter into the 5th century BCE, a couple of things are emerging. First, you have a new Athenian democracy. Then as you get into that century, the Persians invade. try to conquer Greece several times, but unsuccessfully. But then the Greeks start fighting amongst themselves, led on one side by Athens and on the other side by Sparta, and that's the Peloponnesian War, which ends with Sparta being victorious, but all of the Greek city-states being weakened dramatically. Now, between the end, especially the first part of the Greco-Persian Wars, and the end of the Peloponnesian War, it was actually a time of Athenian prosperity. They were leading this semi-empire. They were investing in the arts. And it's often called the golden age of Athens. And that's the world in which Socrates emerged. Like many philosophers, Socrates led a very interesting life. And it's worth noting, what we know about him does not come directly from his writing. We don't have surviving accounts of his writing. It comes mainly through the writing of his students, Xenophon and most notably Plato. We also get some parody of Socrates from Aristophanes that Socrates himself did not appreciate much. But what we know is that he started in life, he was a stonemason. He even acted as a soldier, a hoplite during the Peloponnesian War. But he's, of course, most famous for being a philosopher and for being a teacher. And his teaching style, the Socratic method, is still viewed as something of a best practice today. Rather than lecturing students, to instead ask incisive questions that force a student to deepen their thinking and get closer to the root of an issue, and to learn how to think rather than just having knowledge transmitted to them. Now, what's also notable about Socrates and his many students, including Plato and Aristotle, is that they took a departure of how to think about the world from most of the ancient world. Most of the ancient world was focused on the gods and the metaphysical explaining everything. And while the ancient Greeks did have a large pantheon of gods, Socrates and his fellow philosophers tried to figure out how the world works, why we are here, somewhat independent of the gods. They tried to reason it through. They tried to talk it through, think about it from a rational point of view. And to get a flavor of that, here's a quote: "True wisdom comes to each of us when we realize how little we understand about life, ourselves, and the world around us." So unlike many ancient societies that just tried to explain everything through the metaphysical or through the gods, here you have Socrates saying, no, an ideal, true wisdom is when you appreciate how little we know, this form of intellectual humility. Now, Socrates lived during this golden age of Athens, a time when democracy was flourishing, the age of Pericles. But he himself was a little bit skeptical of unfettered or pure democracy. He was worried, well, what if the people voting aren't educated to make the types of decisions? Maybe they can be manipulated by a demagogue, someone who just tells them exactly what they want to hear. And so he was a bit of a controversial figure, especially as you get to the end of the Peloponnesian War. Remember, Athens loses the Peloponnesian War. It went from being this powerful head of this Delian League, something of an empire, this wealthy city, and now it's a subjugated state. It's tired from war. And so you can imagine there's a lot of political infighting, and Socrates ends up being one of the casualties. He is actually put on trial by his fellow Athenians. This is a depiction of the trial of Socrates, and it shows Socrates defending himself from the accusations brought against him, refusing to recognize the gods acknowledged by the state, importing strange divinities of his own, corrupting the young. And his defense, which both Xenophon and Plato write about, called the Apology, he's bewildered. He says, where is all of this coming from? Now, it is true, he did not invoke the gods when he's trying to explain the universe. And yes, he was trying to teach the young to think, but by no means, if you look at what he was doing, or at least our modern accounts coming through Plato and Xenophon, does it seem like he was trying to undermine the state in some way. But needless to say, it comes to a vote, and maybe he's a victim of his own fears of a pure democratic process. But amongst the 500 Athenians voting, 280 say that he is guilty, and 220 say that he is not guilty. He's given a chance to think about what his penalty should be. And the charges, at least in the Athenians' minds, were quite serious. But Socrates famously says, an unexamined life is not worth living. And so even though many historians think that he might have been able to get exile if he asked for it, he was sentenced to death. And this is a painting done much, much later of what that death of Socrates might have looked like. But you see here Socrates about to, or maybe he just drank, the hemlock, which is the poison which will kill him. So even though he had to die for these pretty spurious allegations, his legacy lives on. And it lives on most famously in his student Plato. Now, Plato is famous for many things. There's this notion of a Platonic ideal form that whether you're talking about a circle or a ball or a dog or a chair, that there's an ideal form that is independent of what your senses are telling you or what the chair in front of you might be. That's an imperfect version of that ideal form. The word Platonic in general, you will hear applied to many different concepts, some of the meanings having changed over time. The other thing that Plato is famous for is the notion of an academy. The place where he taught his students was a little field outside the walls of Athens, named for the Athenian hero Academos. And so that area became known as Plato's Academy. And ever since then, places of learning have often been referred to as academies, just like Khan Academy. But Plato was also concerned, like his teacher Socrates, with the nature of how we should be ruled. There will be no end to the troubles of states, or indeed of humanity itself, till philosophers become rulers in this world, or till those we now call kings and rulers really and truly become philosophers, and political power and philosophy thus come into the same hands. So like Socrates, he's wary of how they have been governed. And remember, we're now after the period of the Peloponnesian War. The city-states of Greece, and especially Athens, have been dramatically weakened. So a lot of people might be thinking, including Plato, well, is there a better way to govern ourselves? Now, Plato's most famous student is Aristotle. And like his teacher, Aristotle is famous for many things and explored many dimensions of the universe. But he is probably most famous for being the tutor of Alexander the Great when Alexander the Great was young. Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great's father, as he conquers the weakened city-states after the Peloponnesian War, he also conquers Aristotle's hometown of Stagira, and he enslaves the population. And so when he goes to Aristotle to tutor his young son, who ends up being called Alexander the Great eventually, Aristotle says, okay, my fee will be free the people of my town. His town is freed. He tutors a young Alexander when Alexander's in his early teens. And he also gets support for a center of learning. He creates a lyceum, which is his version of Plato's Academy. And just like you saw with Socrates and you see with Plato, Aristotle continued this tradition of a focus on learning and a humble acceptance of all that there might be in the world, this rationality that we now see in modern science that you didn't see from a lot of the ancients who are focused on the metaphysics and the gods. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And I'll leave you there. But the big takeaway is going from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle, and there were many other Greek philosophers, you have the seed of what you could call modern rationality. Roughly 2,000 years later, you have the European Renaissance that starts re-emerging many of these same ideas, all the way providing a bridge into the Enlightenment and now our modern, hopefully fairly rational view of the world.
Okay, that video covered those three main philosophers of Greek time. And it kind of gave you a little more information about what happened to them, how they were located, who they followed. But I think as we think about philosophy, which is the way we learn, philosophy is the way we think, and everyone is individual with processing how we reason, how we take in information, if we agree with it or disagree with it. But philosophy is a great class to take. And again, it's usually covered in other classes, some form or fashion, or some part of philosophy. And so it's the way we think. And these three philosophers were responsible for bringing academies. Oh, great spelling this morning. Academies, like schools, like institutions. If you go to an academy, it could be like West Point Academy. They still use the word instead of school. And then also, some of you in life have maybe been to what they call a lyceum. And they bring those into colleges for students to go watch or go listen to speakers. We have them at tribes. Lyceums can be on any subject area. Kat Perkins, when she got a little famous with her singing, would go to schools with a good voice about social media and the arts and working hard and staying away from drugs. And so she gave lyceums in present day, but they would get together in the public squares and discuss items. Now, it wasn't all just about math, science, English, and history. They also talked about democracy and how they were being governed. And that's what got Socrates into a little trouble with the 500 senators. And he was a little naive there, but he didn't think what he was doing was wrong. But they did put him to death by drinking poison. And he had no works. We don't get to read what he wrote, but a great student of his wrote down what he learned from Socrates. And Plato does have works out there. And as I mentioned on Monday, they're not lengthy. They're 100-page books. The Republic is not a difficult read. You can only kind of read it in doses, like a chapter at a time, because it is so full of information and reasoning and rationality. Socrates did live at the same time that the comic playwright lived, Lysistrata. I mentioned Lysistrata's work, Aristophanes' work, Lysistrata on Monday, where the women are upset with the men going to war. Well, Lysistrata also put Socrates in comedies as well. So even though they were peers and living at the same time, he was able to write about Socrates because he was a well-known figure. The Socratic method was mentioned, and that is how we learn. That is how children learn. After a video, we question answer, we have discussion posts. If things are explained on the whiteboard and then they're repeated on paper and pencil, if there are questions, if there are answers, if you're doing math problems. And so Socrates gave us that method of inquiry, which is still really used today. We ask questions, we want answers, then we question the answers, which is what we do in education and in fields of study. He also did not talk about the gods, because the ancients really relied on metaphysics and religion and going to the gods and goddesses to try to find the answers. Socrates decided that the human being can be rational and to find out answers instead of relying on the gods and goddesses. And so there's a break from that emphasis of just going to the gods and goddesses for answers to more, why can't we find the answers within our brains, okay, within our hearts? And so there's that nice shift that he brings and dies for. But he questioned, instead of how much we know, how much we don't know, and that there's always something new to learn.
Nice.
It's cool. I mean, because we're still
Yeah.
kind of operating with that kind of brain work and when we inquire. And then Plato, his student, then started writing down what he learned from his teacher Socrates, and he developed academies where they were almost like schools. And in today's world, we still have places that use, instead of school, they use the word academy. The videos that I throw in this class are from Khan Academy, which became a free school just to supplement education and the use of technology, because the videos are there, they're made for free, and they're good data. Plato also questioned the way they were being ruled.
I was gonna
Socrates
say,
did,
yeah.
and then Plato did. And so now, they didn't have flat out protests, but in a democracy, you are allowed in most places to question authority and the way things are done and ruled. And so that was also very key for Plato. The third dude, Aristotle, and as I said Monday, I use some of his work in my speech class, especially in the persuasive unit, where students, when they put their persuasive speech together, have to use 3 appeals: emotional appeal in their argument, logical appeal in their argument, and then ethical appeal. And that was based on the work of Aristotle. And then future writers and theorists and philosophers who said, in order to convince people, in order to argue, you have to work with those 3, for sure, those 3 types of appeals. He was the tutor of Alexander the Great, who didn't live a long life, but conquered many parts of the world. The fee for teaching him, he said, free my people.
Mm-hmm.
The barter there, free my people. He considered that a center of learning was the most important thing, that we need to have centers for learning, schools, academies, lyceums, a gathering of minds. Can be in Zoom, it can be paper and pencil, it can be a weekend excursion for book club at the local library. But the focus from Aristotle was rationality and how to improve our thinking, to try to solve problems, to try to change what is wrong and make right. And so you have a real basis, and you'll see this with the other chapters coming down the pike, for modern rationality, to think, to be independent, to question. And so that's really important from these 3 guys in Greek times. Even if you don't like philosophy, it's always very interesting to see how it came about and how it is still studied today. All right, now we're going to go to a very quick scene from the movie Troy. And again, this is based on the myth of Helen of Troy, who was so beautiful. She, is a icon for the most beautiful woman probably ever created in the universe. But she caused lots of death and dying because she ran off with Paris, leaving her husband, who was not going to take it lightly. And so a war began. And this is just, I'll put this in the chat in case people can't view it. And this is just from the movie. It's a trailer from the movie Troy, but it kind of gives you a view of the particular time. Special effects are awesome. So here we go.
been through, recommit yourself. Go back to the file.
I'm gonna find out everything. Everything.
Ignore the politics.
Apparently you won some great victory.
Ah, perhaps you didn't notice. The Trojan beach belonged to Priam in the morning. It belongs to Agamemnon in the afternoon.
Can I have the beach? I didn't come here for sand.
No. You came here because you want your name to last through the ages. A great victory was won today. But that victory is not yours. Kings did not kneel to Achilles. Kings did not pay homage to Achilles.
Perhaps the kings were too far behind to see. The soldiers won the battle.
History remembers kings, not soldiers. Tomorrow we'll batter down the gates of Troy. I'll build monuments to victory on every island of Greece. I'll carve Agamemnon in the stone. My name will last through the ages. Your name is written in sand for the waves to wash away.
Be careful, King of Kings. First, you need the victory.
Your men sacked the temple of Apollo, yes?
You want gold? Take it. It's my gift to honor your courage. Take what you wish.
I already have. Alpharius! Hemon!
Spoils of war. No argument with you, brothers, but if you don't release her, you'll never see home again. Decide.
Guards!
Too many people have died today. Killing's your only talent, that's your curse. I don't want anyone dying for me.
Mighty Achilles, silenced by a slave girl. Tonight, I'll have her give me a bath. And then, who knows?
You sack of wine! Before my time is done, I will look down on your corpse and smile.
Okay, that brief one kind of shows you a little bit background of the battle in the movie Troy. And then I'm going to show you the little video that shows the ships. And the story of Troy is from Homer's The Iliad, and it's 24 books long.
Jeez.
It's a fascinating read. And then he also wrote one called The Odyssey, and that's why they call them epic poems. So it's written in poetry, but it's a fast read once you get through your first chapter and you know who the gods and goddesses are. So we'll see if this is the one where it shows the ships. So it's always fun to kind of get the perspective of that particular scene, where in the actual story, they talk about the 1,000 ships because she had a face that launched 1,000 ships. And so the movie itself has really some good tie-ins with the myth itself, as well. And the myths are not lengthy, but it's based on the 24-chapter book of poetry called the Iliad, by a poet named Homer. Now, we don't know if he actually existed,
Right.
but the book remains. And in my world literature class for my undergrad, we read the Iliad. We had a weekend to read it. We had a book a week. And once you got going with it, because poetry's shorter and it does rhyme, that once you start reading chapter by chapter and you kind of get an idea of what's going on in each chapter by the characters and the war, it's a faster read than it sounds. And they have tried to make the other book, the Odyssey. They made it a mini series a while back. And they didn't put all the good stories in it, but they did put some of the better ones. And of course, you're dealing with men and women, and then you're dealing with gods and goddesses, because the king there was a real human documented, whereas Achilles, Brad Pitt's character, Achilles was a god. And so you have this really great variety of characters.
So I'm sorry. Achilles was not Troy, or
No, Troy's a place.
okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's a place. Yeah. And Helen, that's all right. The Helen, the woman that had the beauty and had the affair and caused the war, because with mythology, we know there are soap operas. She was from Troy. And that's why the movie's called Troy, because she was Helen of Troy. And she's also in other art.
Stupid.
Yeah, no. And, when you look at the 1,000 ships, you kind of go, oh, yeah, this is no small battle here that they're going for this. They're going after this woman who went with Orlando Bloom and left her husband. So the king got mad, Priam, and he goes against Agamemnon. And they have a battle, and the battle scenes are truly epic. But Troy is one of the more famous in recent movies as far as the Greeks. Here's also more films about the Greek period. And Troy, they list as #1. It is a slow moving film, but it does have pretty good cinematography and good special effects, especially the battle scenes. Then there is 300, which I think has been on Netflix. And then we have one called Agora, Alexander, and Atlantis. Famous one that's been remade is called Clash of the Titans. There's another one called Wrath of the Titans. Jason and the Argonauts has been remade. And that's one of the most legendary adventures in all of mythology. There's the Odyssey. And it only has 1 star, but it's about the Trojan War. Ulysses, and that's a cartoon for children. Minotaur, Xena, Hercules, and we have more on Hercules. There's several.
Is Xena fictional?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're myths. And then there's Goliath and the dragon. And more Hercules. As you can see, many movies made about Hercules. Ulysses. Right. So, and a lot of these are older films, but there's Fury of Achilles. And so you can see that the use of mythology in storytelling in any culture. But the Greeks did have quite a variety of different myths, and they're not lengthy, because I read you the myth of Oedipus the other day, and it's 2 pages long, but it's very complex. And the Greeks loved complications. They loved how things were interconnected and how webs were built, either with deceit or with finding truth. And then this one is about minute 30. That shows you a little bit about the myth of Hercules.
This is what I want on tape. Soleil not smiling.
As a teenager, I carried a camera with me everywhere I went. This is the first.
I'm Varys. Do we die in this battle?
My time's not come yet. Not sure about yours.
Let's go for it.
I think he wants a challenge.
Hercules' fists have been dipped in the blood of the Hydra. Lethal to anyone but him. What?
Is that right?
Did you see that? The gods fight on our side. Hercules! 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 Power position! And pass! Hold your position! Do not yield! No retreat! Stay in the wall! Hold the line! Do not yield! The faithful come! Where's the trailer?
There he is. So that kind of gives you a quick kind of picture of Hercules, half man, half God, and the strength and how many movies and stories have been written and rewritten about him.
Reminds me of Gladiator.
Yes, it does. And that's Roman times. And but you can see how they transfer and the stories get different names, etc. But war stories are always interesting for the masses to view, to watch, and to read about. One more thing, when I was building the class and I read the New York Times every day, there is a really good play by the Greek playwright Euripides. Now you saw Antigone, part of that on Monday, but they recently, before the pandemic, did the play on Broadway with Rose Byrne and Bobby Cannavale. You probably know him from some shows and movies. He's a pretty famous guy. Let's see if it's gonna let me. Oh, it's probably not. I mean, I can log in, but I don't want to today. Anyway, they did a recent play of this Greek tragedy. And Medea is a woman, and she's married to Jason of the Argonauts. So he's pretty famous as well. He cheats on her. And so through the course of the play, she finds out and becomes very jealous, because jealousy is one of the themes that causes the destruction of humans, and it poisons. And so at the end of the play, it's very disturbing what she does and how the play ends. And so, and it's the play's ending where she brings out two dead children, one on each arm. And I've seen this play done, you know, in the Dakotas, in Minnesota. And so it's not a lengthy play, but if you know the background of Medea and Jason of the Argonauts, famous warrior, and then his infidelity causes her to go mad. And then at the very last scene of the play, he's on the stage and she walks out with their 2 dead children. And she commits then, when the mother commits the murder of children, the matricide. And so the Greeks ended, you know, Euripides ended that play with something so horrible, so that when people walked out of the amphitheater, they witnessed something just horrifying. And so the plays are still being done. Many times they'll bring it to kind of contemporary costuming and music. But that was 2 years ago that they were producing this for 6 weeks in New York. And 2 pretty famous actors in the lead roles, in a very difficult play to do, but well written. And like I said, the Greeks waste no time when they start their plays. Antigone, you saw how the sisters were talking right away. What are we going to do with our brother? What can we do? And Antigone already knows what she's going to do. She's already made up her mind and she'll die doing it. Where in Medea, you get all the background of what Jason did, and Medea can't handle it. And that's how that particular show ends. But the article I can't open right now. So we're going to then just go to a final PowerPoint about art. And then we're going to talk a little bit about your midterm projects, and then we'll take a break around 10:30. There's a lot to do with the Greeks, but we'll do as best we can in our short periods. And so this talks about the Aegean world, which is the Aegean Sea is by Greece, and the rise of Greece at this time. Comparing the different cultures, learning about the epic, the Iliad, the Odyssey, which I covered a little bit. We talked a little bit about the beginning of democracy. Here we have a miniature ship fresco. And the total length of this fresco, this painting, is 24 feet. And it shows harbors such as this one provided shelter to traders who went to all the islands. So there's another picture of it. You see the different ships, the kind of land formations, and how they started to document, and we still have that. The Cyclades are a group of more than 100 islands in the Aegean Sea. No written record remains, but archaeologists have found a good deal of art. Marble, abstract figurines, mostly depicting women, were found in graves. And so here it gives you a map of the area. So you can see, like I said, the Mediterranean weather is always 75 degrees. So if you ever want to move to someplace, that's always nice. They say, oh, it has Mediterranean climate, but it shows you the thousands of islands that are there. Here is one that is 17 inches. It's a figurine of a woman from the Cyclades.
I like that.
Yeah, and this one is in Berlin. So ownership of this particular figurine this one is in Germany at the museum. The Minoan culture, it flourished. Paintings, there was an emphasis on the bull. They painted on walls of homes and palaces. The fresco became very popular. The Minoan religion worshipped female deities, female goddesses, were closely associated with the cult of vegetation and fertility. And the Minoans worshipped on mountaintops and deep in caves. So they went toward heaven and toward the middle of the earth. So here is a very famous painting called The Bull Leaping. And this one's on the island of Crete by Greece. The darker patches of the fresco are original fragments. And the lighter areas are modern restorations. And we have palaces. They were organized around a central open courtyard. They had corridors, staircases, and passageways. And then the legend of Minos and the Minotaur. It was a creation or origin myth. Here's a reconstruction drawing of the new palace complex, so you can see how complex it was, the various levels, the different kinds of buildings, and it was kind of a maze, a labyrinth layout. One thing connected to another, probably being built on as they went. Here is a grand staircase, east wing of the palace. And this was reconstructed by Sir Arthur Evans. And you see the light well and how it links all 5 stories of the palace. Very complex.
Yeah.
And then we have the mainlanders. They occupied Crete and they adopted the Minoan artistic traditions. Here is a Vafio cup from a tomb south of Sparta in Greece. And so you can see invaders use Crete as a base for operations. And they probably acquired the cup there during one of the invasions.
Is that cup gold?
Yeah. Here is an aerial view of the citadel. So we're seeing it from the sky. The walls were built around 1300, which made it a progressively larger enclosure. And that's a reconstruction of the model of the citadel at Mycenae, Greece. Very little beyond the foundations of the buildings survive. Thus, the representation of the multi-story structures is almost wholly kind of imagined, because not much remains. Limestone relief. This is 9 feet tall. The lionesses are carved on a triangle of a stone in the massive doorway. The original heads, which have never been found, were attached to the bodies.
There's a place like that in South America, I think.
Yep.
It's exactly.
Yeah. So you wonder, how did they get over there? Well, they took boats. Here, the guy that was arguing with Brad Pitt in the movie Troy, his name was Agamemnon. He was a very famous king. Here is his funeral mask from Grave Circle A in Greece. When Schliemann discovered this mask, he believed it was the death mask of King Agamemnon, but it predates the Trojan War by 300 years. Recent scholars then suggest that Schliemann may have added the handlebar mustache and large ears, perhaps to make the mask appear more heroic.
That's a shame.
They altered, yeah.
Right.
This is a round building, and you can kind of see the formation there. The dome is an example of corbelled construction. You see the roof's squared stones curved inward toward the top. They were buttressed or supported on the outside by earth. Because of the conical shape of such burial chambers, they are known as the beehive tombs. Homeric epics. The Bronze Age brought written language. They began to write their myths down and the stories from the past. Homer's stories were part of a long-standing oral tradition. He used epithets, descriptive phrases, and then the Iliad, the 24 book about the Helen of Troy, the Trojan War, then began epic conventions. And conventions are simply rules that books used. You know, if it's going to be an epic story, it's going to have 24 chapters. It's going to be this many pages. Here is a warrior vase. This is information on the epics. Here are possible routes that they took the Greek fleets as they gathered and then went to war with Troy. At the end of book 2 of the Iliad, and again, there were 24 books, 24 chapters, Homer catalogs the participating parties in the Trojan War. He lists kings and their followers from more than 150 places. It seems doubtful that the conflict was truly precipitated by the abduction of Helen from Sparta. More likely, the Greeks wanted to wrest control of the Dardanelles from the Trojans because they wanted access to trading in the Black Sea and Asia in the north. So they say the myth is about the woman, but it could be it just was about the economy. They wanted more money. Here is a Botkin class amphora. Here we have black figures decorated on ceramic. This one's in Boston. On the other side of the vase are two heavily armed warriors, one pursuing the other. And then Homer's second epic book was called The Odyssey. And this is about Odysseus. Good warrior, great fighter, but it takes him 20 years to get home from the Battle of Troy. So he fights in the Trojan War. He's a great warrior, but the book is about how it took him 20 years to get back to his wife and his child. And so love is a theme. His family is a theme. It talks about how human beings are in complete control of how they live. And the stories from the Odyssey became the basis of Greek education because he does overcome tremendous battles and odds to get home. So when we go on Odysseys, we think, oh yeah, we're taking a trip, we're doing this. This particular story it's also about her, his wife, and the child he leaves behind. Here is the Trojan horse. That's how Odysseus and his troops got into Troy. They constructed this huge horse, and the soldiers hid inside the belly. And that's how they were able to get inside the palace gates. And this is the earliest known depiction of the Trojan horse, that it was actually real, that it was used in a battle.
How do they know it wasn't just a story?
Right. The artist has opened little windows in its side, showing the Greeks hiding within, ready to attack. Here is the blinding of Polyphemus. This is from inside a drinking cup. At the same time that Odysseus and his companions blind Polyphemus with a pointed pole. Some of you know this character as the Cyclops. And so when Odysseus and his men fight the Cyclops, the only way they can destroy him is to take out his only eye, because he has one eye in the center of his skull as the mythological character. And so
again,
yeah, Odysseus then and his men make him completely blind. They get him drunk on wine, according to the myth, and then they allow them to complete their task by blinding him. So he cannot kill the troops that he has imprisoned. And in the movie Odysseus, they do show, in the Odyssey, they show a scene with Cyclops of how the troops are able to do this.
He's holding two legs.
Yeah. Here are more city-states that become Greece. And they all are kind of like the size of our counties or our states. They're not large in landmass, but they're each their own kind of county governments, country governments, like provinces in Canada. And then here is where the treasury was at Delphi. And this shows just below the roof line, it depicts the adventures of two great Greek mythological heroes, Theseus and Heracles. So they would be up in this area. Here's a model of a temple. This is the sanctuary of Hera. She was the wife of the supreme god Zeus. These are the columns that the Greeks gave us for architecture. The Doric column, then the Ionic, and then the one that's very ornate is called the Corinthian. And they would all become very well used in Roman times. So they just don't end with the Greeks. This stuff now will cross over into future chapters, the architecture use. Here's a temple of Hera, which is not in Greece. This one is in Italy. So,
Really?
yeah, so you can see now how the works that began in Greece now are transferring over to other geographies. And you will see more and more in the next chapter of that heavy Greek influence with the Romans. And that's the architecture, the floor plan. More art, terracotta. This one's in New York. Greek athletes compete in the nude. In fact, our word gymnasium derives from the Greek word for naked or gymnast. So if that's the only thing you learn in class today, so be it. Isn't that funny how, we listen to words, we go, oh yeah, it's just a word, but then we find out a background of it and it's like, oh, I'm not going to the gymnasium. They're naked in there.
Have you ever seen that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
Yes, isn't it good?
Yeah, this comes from the Greek word.
Yeah, seriously. And more on male sculptures and the cult of the body, how it went from the very rigid to the very moving. They had them in motion. And so we had Egyptian influences with the stiff, clenched fists, forward stride. And now we're kind of seeing increased naturalism with reflected the growing role of the individual in political life. So there's one, a sculpture is one of the earliest known life-size standing sculptures of a male in Greek art. So you see the heavy Egyptian influence, but now you're starting to see as the Greeks evolve, you see now the foot in front, the clenched fists, the anatomy, the motion. Again, there's still Egyptian influence there. And then we have female sculptures with the worship of Athena. Of course, the women were clothed in early sculptures, and then the nudes came out. Pottery, it's a two-handed drinking cup. Kind of what little kids use in today's world when they get away from the bottle and they get those sippy cups with two-handed. This was a monumental vase placed above a grave as a memorial. A hole in the bottom allowed for the pouring of offerings to go through it. This one has black figures. It's a water jug. The convention of depicting women's skin as white was also found in Egyptian and Minoan art. This is curved up like a flower. You see kind of the petals. The crater was housed in a collection in New York until it became clear that it was illegally excavated in Italy in early 1970s. And so it was returned back to Italy in 2008. All right, and a little bit more. Two women, one playing a musical instrument. Some notes on democracy. So it's 10:24 right now, kids. Let's take a break till 10:34. We'll come back and we will do, I'll show you an example of the midterm paper and PowerPoint. So you can kind of get an idea if you want to get started with your artist. Be
Okay.
back at 10:34. Take your break. Thank you. We'll see you in a bit. Hola.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
We're getting there, but yeah, there's just so
Hola.
much. There's so much here. I'm just kind of looking at some old papers. And so you get the kind of what it looks like, so you don't get stressed and think it's like 20 pages long. The paper isn't that long, so, but it does help to get a look. And with the directions. So do we have most returning? We're at 10:34. Okay, so as I promised, I'm gonna just kind of show you examples of the 5-paragraph essay. And I'll put the specifics for the project in Google Classroom. So you know that it's 5 paragraphs. It has 3 references, where to go for references, you know, what's a good reference place for a database for your artists. And some of my students are starting to go to artist websites. I accept those because there's really sometimes good biography information on there. I also have students that do chats on Facebook or on their phones, and then they just collect, you know, the question answers that they've asked their artists because they actually know the artist. I accept that. I think interviews are fantastic. And if it's through text messenger, I just say to students, make sure you save them, because that you're not always going to remember what's covered in texting back and forth. And that can be on Facebook or it can be on your phones. But those messages and those interview questions are really important to ask artists. Now, most students, when they think of a 5-paragraph essay, number one, it's doable. But most will have 3 parts that they're going to write about when they write about an artist. And you get to decide what you're going to write about. Some of you will write maybe a paragraph about the family. Some of you might write about schooling and where this artist went to school, or if the artist didn't go to school and is self-taught. Some of you might write about one of the particular works. If it's jewelry, you might write a paragraph in this essay about that particular work, you know, that bracelet, how it was made, what it looks like. And so as writers about artists, you can choose the design of your paper because they all kind of have different looks. So when I take you to a website and show you what students have produced recently, you'll see that, oh, some start with biography, or they start with, you know, how they grew up, who they grew up with. And then some will start about art influences, you know, why did they become an actor? Because right now we have 2 artists posted on the topic sheet, and one is an actor. And so how did that work? How did that start? What were connections? And so it's always interesting to find that information out, but it's also interesting to write about and to share it with us. And so I'm just going to take you to one of the websites. So I'm in the classroom, but we used to put our assignments on websites. I build them for every semester, but we're just going to post everything in our Google Classroom this year. So let's go to, we'll go to classic sites. And I have quite a list there, but hopefully it comes up. There it is. And for most of your comp classes, you've had to produce a 5-paragraph essay. So I'll give you the format, what I expect. Most are 5 to 8 sentences, what should be in your intro, etc. And so we'll go to the paper. So your paper should, if you are a visual learner, it'll have 5 paragraphs, okay? The first paragraph will be the intro. It should have an attention getter, background info, the thesis, which is your artist's name and why the artist is important. And the 3 parts of your paper should also be written in a sentence that you're going to cover biography, biographical information. You're going to write about the artist's education. And then you're going to write about a movie he was in. Paragraph 2 will be the first thing you write about. Paragraph 3 will be the second. And paragraph 4 will be the third thing, kind of the third section or division you write about your artist. And then the conclusion, if you write a really good introduction, your conclusion just restates it all. So you restate your thesis in different words. You refer back to the attention getter. You review the 3 parts of the paper, what you decided to write about. And then you restate background information. All right, so then I'm going to look at some of these and I'm going, no. I think I'll go to my afternoon class. Paper, see who's in this one. I think I had 3 sections back then, so I'll just go look. We'll go to J's. All right, so it's MLA format. And so you see that Jarell has her name, then her teacher's name, then the class, and the date it's due, okay? So MLA format is Times New Roman, size 12. All right, so she begins her paper with a quotation from the artist, and she took it from his website. So she's got word for word in quotes stated, and then she also tells us where that information came from. And then she gives us more information about him in this introduction. So, but she starts it with a quotation. And then she gives us background. And then she goes into how he got into acting, modeling, and motivational speaking, how he worked in the agency. And then she ends with how he's a motivational speaker and he talks to Native youth who feel alone with uplifting messages. And then her conclusion. So as you look at the amount of writing, she has 5 very full paragraphs. And then at the end in MLA for 3 references, she is using 4, but we call it works cited in MLA. It's alphabetical. And then she tells us where she got the information. This is from informs.net. This is from his website. This is from Native Max magazine. And this is from Meet the New 25 under 25 class members from Unity Inc. And so as a writer then, when she steals information from those places that she's listed, she lets me know in parentheses where she took the data from. His website, Meet the New 25, Native Max magazine, page 33. So as you view your midterm, this is your midterm exam, it's project 1. It will take some time to locate articles, websites about the artist, but that's pretty much the format, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I think once students just buckle down and start writing, it gets done pretty fast. Now, I'm going to take you to her PowerPoint. And I like very clean PowerPoints. I like one fact, one image. I don't like a lot of stuff and a lot of writing on a PowerPoint because it overloads the reader. And so if you keep them really clean, cool beans. The rubric for the PowerPoint is organization, central message, the delivery when you share it to class, your supporting material, if you use MLA format, and your pictures. I had a big class, and see, they posted their own work, so it was always nice that we did this, but then I thought, no, we don't have to. We can keep it in Google Classroom.
That's a big
Right.
class.
Yeah, we get 20 in some of our humanities and speech classes, but they were off. It was the 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 days a week. So here is the format. Slide number 1, I want your artist image. I want the artist's name big, and then your name, mine, class, and date. Now, do you see that she just copied and pasted that from her paper? Because her paper had this at the top left. And so all she had to do was copy and paste it from her paper. I will see if I can go back to her paper. I'll go back to her paper and just show you how all you have to do is keep your paper in front of you. And so after you're done writing it, bring your 12 slides up and then just copy and paste the info over because the work is done. So here's her paper. And you see where she just took this data and copied and pasted it over to her PowerPoint. See that?
Yep.
Isn't that great? It's like, okay, so then you'll have 10 slides with information from the paper, okay? And then she got images. And then what she did on the very last slide was she went to the end of her paper,
Copy and paste it.
copied and pasted it. So it covers your butt as far as citing sources, you know, so that somebody can't accuse you of plagiarism if you have this here and you've also put it on the slide. All right. I know this is a lot, but it's kind of nice to see how we build them. So we'll take it from the top and then I'm not going to talk. We're just going to watch it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to talk. I love her black background. And then she also tells us where she got her image.
So no music or anything.
No, well, some, if they have a musician, will have.
Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, you know.
Hmm.
So that kind of gives you today, and I'll put specifics about the project in your Google Classroom. So you kind of have, right now, you're just posting topics about who you're going to do your writing about. You've made your documents, and so I'll get rid of mine. Although I think I will put a template here so that you see MLA format. But so far in class, we've got students posting. These will be due June 18th, so I'll have time to read them and you know, get them completed before the session ends, because we are, you know, first week in July, we're pretty much done. So they will be due June 18th. We're still in May. And so it is something that is accomplishable, and they have been just very outstanding, the ones that I've received. I'm trying to think, was it last fall or last spring? Every semester is very different with what students choose or who they choose to write about. When I first began, I had more of traditional Native art, and then in the spring of the first year, then I started to see more multimedia. And then one semester, music, Native music and musicians and rappers from Minneapolis area, and she knew him personally, so she had a personal interview, and then her PowerPoints, her Google Slides had videos of his musical style and some of his performances. So when you share them with the class, sometimes they can go a little bit long instead of like 2-minute presentation. If you do have videos, if they are a performance artist, you might have segments of maybe movies they've done, or maybe a speech that they've given. And I'm trying to remember, I know who the student is, so I'm just trying to remember that particular PowerPoint. But I had it as an example in Zoom this spring semester, and students were entering the class and the rapper was going. So I think they were wondering, now what's going on? But she had put together a really decent presentation. I'm going to go look for it. So give me 1 minute. I'm remembering the student now, and she really had a great time putting it together. And I thought that's the most important thing when you enjoy something that you work on. Let's see if I can find, it was fall. I think it was fall 20. I'm going to see if I can find her PowerPoint. I'm still looking, so give me 1 more minute. It's
No
like,
worries. No worries.
let's see. No, it wasn't him. I'm going through like 15 of them. I'm going, oh, I thought it was this one, but I did somebody else. Let's see, I'll go down.
I'm kind of nervous about this assignment.
About the paper or?
Well, both.
Well,
It takes me forever to write one.
right. And that's why we give you a little, we give you almost, well, 3 weeks before it's due. I'm going to
Yeah.
look up one more here to see if I can locate her. It's like, where did she go? She wasn't in fall. And spring, she wasn't in spring. I thought she was fall. Yeah, fall of. I thought she was in that class, but I'm not finding it with my fall humanities. It'd be faster if I just went to my Excel doc, because then I can see the artist. We'll try just a couple more. There.
Yay.
I'm going, I could just see her in class and hear her voice. And oh, here's her. I remember playing the music before kids entered in here last January, and they're just like, I was listening to his music and kind of watching her work again because she did a nice job. So here, his name is Chase Manhattan. Some of you will know, and this is her work. And so we watched.
And the award goes to not performance. Chase Manhattan.
So that's when he won his award. And then this is one of.
We got a special rap artist coming up here on stage. And you're going to help me out. Someone can get up and start dancing too. We have our own Native American rap artist. These are our own Minneapolis from Minnesota called Afro Ojibwe Nations. Put your hands together for Mr. Chase Manhattan.
Natives just gang banging, ladies who brain swinging, drummers that keep dumping, warriors who beat good, you baby, let's two-step, step, tornadoes, two-step, the original two-step. Come on, baby, let's one two-step. Shake it like the bells when you jingle dress. Are you single, man, gonna snag one up for a drink? Cause I don't think you had enough, ayy. Get smacked for acting tough. Fresher than the ground when the grass is cut. Getting down like the powwow, that's what's up. Ladies smack your butt. Look at man when they slap the drum. Get loose and have some fun, you know. Same old chase with a new flow. I'm too cold as a northern native. On the real, I feel like I was born to make it. I ignore these haters, I'm just too busy. Catch me on both sides of the Mississippi. Do the make it rain dance in every city. Give me drop that ride, come on, get with me. Natives just gang banging, banging, brain swinging. Drummers that keep dumping, warriors who beat good. Hey, baby, listen. Come on, my natives, listen. The original. Hit the drums in up the tempo, put the trunk in the club or in your headphones. Riding pintos, going your wrist, roll off.
And so she continues. She got a lot of.
Native American rap artist. These are all Minneapolis from Minnesota.
She put on the videos, and then he goes beyond his rap music with a clothing line. And so in the middle of her PowerPoint and her paper, then one of her divisions went from how he began to how he's evolving with his designs, and his biggest seller, of course, with the Vikings there in Minneapolis. And then here, my favorite hater video, more awards for him. And then she tells us more and goes to the website of his clothing line, gives us more pictures, and then shares at the end his Facebook data. So I've given you kind of two very different contemporary artists and two very different presentations, which is, I want on that first slide, you know, your artist, the name, and then your information, your class information. And then I want 10 slides, keep them as clean as possible with maybe one picture, one fact. Here we saw someone who, you know, put like 2 videos that were short, but kind of showed his art. And then the final slide is your last page of your paper, which is your works cited, where you got your information. I'm pretty liberal with this because in some classes you're going to have, you know, straight database use. I like to see you use the databases in our library because they're free and it's excellent data. If you just Google something, anybody can be on Google. And so, but with these particular artist reports, we're seeing more use of their websites because they're putting websites. We're in the world of technology. They may have a, yeah.
Is the library even open?
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay, awesome.
Right. But you don't have to go there.
Oh.
Yeah. Everything's online.
Okay.
So what was that rap name? What was his name? The rapper that we just listened to?
Chase Manhattan.
Right. So I'm going to show you how to find an article about him in the library. And it's going to be 2 clicks of a button. And if you've taken my speech class, you've had to work in the databases, but once you get in there, it's not difficult. And so my summer speech class has already been in there. They've already had assignments. Let's see, I want to make sure we get the whole thing here. And I'll put this at the top in in your humanities class right now. So we're going to look something up on Chase Manhattan before we begin the Romans. And the Romans kind of start with how the Greeks ended. So announcing something to your class, if you've never been in the library, you physically do not have to go there. They are online for you with everything you need, okay? And so in your humanities class right now, I've given you access to the UTTC library electronic resources. So if there's something on your artist you want to look up, you go to the UTTC webpage, you go to the tab that says Our Students, then it says Resources, then you hit Library, then you hit Library Resources, then Electronic Resources. And you are going to love these babies because everything you collect has the capability to go in your Google Drive. They're connected. And the librarians started loving students a couple years ago. And my first fall at UTTC, I went, oh my God, they put Google Drive in here. Hallelujah. So you don't even have to print anything out. It'll save directly to your Google Drive. And we'll look up an article on Chase Manhattan. And then there's something called Odin databases. Once you find a good article, look at the right side. Odin lets you save in Google Drive, create a permalink. You can open it up on your phone, add to outline and make an MLA citation. Very nice of those librarians. And they've just recently done this. So it's just made it click, click, click. And it was done a couple years before the pandemic. But and students from past classes like Academic Search Premier, they like Gale, US newspapers, EBSCO, WorldCat, and ProQuest. Now, if you don't know what in the world those are, I am going to take you there. So here we go. Let's go to UTTC. And then you see your tabs. Go to Our Students, Library. Now the library webpage is going to come up. And you go down to Library Resources, Electronic Resources. Okay, now here's where you're going to find decent data. Here, it's going to have you write United Tribes. And I already have the password and the login code there, but they're in Classroom. I put it there for you. So now you're in Odin. It's free. Hit databases. Let's go down to US News and see if Chase is in there. He's from Minneapolis, so it includes the Star Tribune. So there's probably an article about him or several. So let's just do Chase Manhattan. All right, I'm going to put native wrapper. Okay, we've got 20 articles. As a student, you should always on the left click full text. And so I'm going into the first article here. Now, if you pay attention, it's going to show you where you can save it, you can cite it, and all options. So you can put it in Google Drive. So if you just click that, it'll put it in my Google Drive if you like your article. It does MLA formatting for you. So if you struggle with that with papers, it does it for you. So here's the article about him. You can save it as a PDF, but if you have Google Drive and you've got Google Docs in here, it saves it in the cloud. I'll click my account and then we'll go in to my Google Drive and you'll see I have the article. God bless librarians. So I've got it in my Google Drive. How do I know? Well, I'll go to my 9 dots. I'll hit Drive under my apps. And the article about Chase Manhattan is going to be right here. Is that crazy?
Awesome.
So you don't have to go to the library. The library is with your fingertips. I used it a lot with my online schooling for my dissertation and collecting articles about my topic. And so if you haven't done the procedure of getting into the online library, I just put it in your Google Classroom. Practice that, practice using it. Because once you start collecting information about your subject, your artist, it's really nice to have it all in one place instead of printed here, in a folder there, on a flash drive. I haven't used a flash drive in 12 years. I've used the cloud for my information, and I've never lost anything. It can happen. I haven't known students or fellow teachers to have lost. So yeah, the paper is 5 paragraphs. Paragraphs should run 5 to 8 sentences, Parker, and it goes to about 2.5, 3 pages long. I showed you Jay's, and hers is about 2.5 pages, and then the 3rd page was her references. Okay, I would start working on it yesterday if it's due June 18th, unless you just procrastinate and you can get it done in a day. Most tell me that once they write their paper, the PowerPoint, the Google Slides are really easy. It's just finding pictures, you know, because they have the information to transfer over. So, yeah. Does that help a little? And then I'll put specifics for the assignment in Google Classroom. But yeah, it's not a lengthy paper. Number one, we don't have time. And because we're all at different levels of writing, my expectation is for you to look up a couple articles, go to their website, know how to use MLA to cite it, and it does it for you in that library. And that just started where they let you do the citations. So it's better than having to type them all out. So, all right. I know, seriously, it really does help. So here we go. Enough on the paper for now, but thinking of topics, I see so far we have Rodney Grant and Russell Means. I want the name of your artist here, and then the list below do not use because they've been used in the last 2 years. So we're collecting a really good list of various artists. I put them in alphabetical order of what students here have written about and presented. And it's been quite good. I'm going, oh, there's Chase Manhattan. But yeah, we've had a good variety and all different kinds of artists here. So make sure you get those posted and then post your blank document and your blank PowerPoints, and you get a few points for posting those in Google Classroom. All right. I can go on about the Native American databases and what good ones to use, but students in the past couple of years really liked these certain databases. And when I looked up Chase Manhattan just now, I went to the one called US Newspapers, and there were 20 articles about him. And so that's right in your classroom. And then the topics right there. So, and I should put, I'll edit here. I'll just edit that it's due June 18th. All right, good. All right, we're gonna go to the beginning of the Romans. And it's so funny because when I start with chapter 3 with the Roman materials, they're famous for roads. And so when you look at the metaphor and what is selected, it is the word place. So it's kind of interesting how in the world of Rome and its great civilization that they too did not last a long time, but they did try with military to conquer the world. It did fail because once they got out into all parts of the world, stuff at home began to crumble. And that's when Rome then disintegrated. But the metaphor for ancient Rome will be the metaphor of place. And when we talk about Rome, it's kind of fun to see National Geographic and 10 fun facts for kids and how they describe Rome. What are the top movies about ancient Rome? What are some famous places and architectures? In Khan Academy, it's a good video about 3D ancient Rome. But usually I start with there was a mini series or a series called Rome. I don't know if it was Netflix, HBO. I never watched it. But it's kind of interesting that we left with Hercules and that little video from the movie. And I usually start this unit with looking at the final scene from the TV series called Rome. And we'll watch it because you'll see
Who would you? You're about to enter Rome as a blood-stained conqueror, and yet you look as calm as a cup of water. I'm glad I appear, son. Crackers! Something more cheerful.
Okay, so we kind of start the section on Rome, and as we look at the images of the military, the formations, the marching, the how they costumed, you know, with the use of headgear, the kinds of weapons, it kind of shows how the Greek influence then transferred over to Rome, and then Rome copied most of it and then added to other parts of the culture. Again, we'll go take a quick peek at, this one's a National Geographic for kids, but it kind of tells us 10 quick facts about ancient Rome. So as we learn, we kind of just go, okay, quick overview, that's good. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Okay, here we go. So here are 10 quick facts about ancient Rome from National Geographic for kids. But it kind of in a nutshell tells us what they're famous for and the history of it. Number one, Rome was founded in 753 BC by its first king. His name was Romulus. It grew into a rich and powerful city during the next few hundred years. By AD 117, the Roman Empire included the whole of Italy, all the lands around the Mediterranean, and much of Europe, including England, Wales, parts of Scotland. And we could see the roads that were built by Romans 4 years ago when I took a tour of England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. And you can see where it ended. Like this was the very last place the Romans got to in Scotland. In parts of England. It's called Hadrian's Wall. Number three, Roman legend. So here we're back to the myths and legends. Says that Romulus had a twin brother called Remus. As babies, they were abandoned in the area which later became Rome. A she-wolf found and raised them. But when they grew up, Romulus fought and killed his brother Remus and became the first ruler. 4, the Romans built such a huge empire and conquered new lands thanks to their strong army. The army could march up to 40 kilometers a day. And I always say to my math students, okay, how long is that? During battle, a Roman soldier or legionary first hurled his spear at the enemy. Then he fought him with his sword. To protect himself, he carried a wooden shield and wore a metal helmet and armor. So we're starting to see levels of military use and uniform. 6, the Romans didn't spend all their time fighting. They were amazing architects and engineers too. They built roads, walls, now things we take for granted. 7, to bring water to their cities, the clever Romans built what we call aqueducts, a system of channels and bridges to transport water for public baths and toilets. 8, the Romans liked to enjoy their food, often lying down on a couch while eating with their hands. They occasionally used a spoon, but they would never use a knife and a fork. Rich Romans liked to eat exotic foods such as stork, roast parrot, and even flamingo. Number 9, the Romans believed in gods and goddesses who ruled over different areas of life. For example, Neptune was the god of the ocean, and they prayed to him to protect them at sea. Temples were built to honor the gods, and people would visit them with offerings. One of the most famous buildings left by ancient Rome is the Colosseum. It's a huge amphitheater in the center of the city of Rome. This is where members of the public would come to watch sporting events and games, including battles between Roman gladiators. 11. Tunics, 2 pieces of woolen fabric sewn together at the sides and shoulders, with openings for your arms and head, were the most common clothes in Rome. Some Romans also wore togas, a kind of woolen shawl to show how wealthy they were. And we saw the red shawl with the soldier in the series called Rome, where we started to see kind of the different layers of military garb. All right, we have top movies about Rome, so we can transfer from what we know about Greece over to stories about Rome. And some you'll know, and some have already been mentioned. And we will go through them quickly. Gladiator, Spartacus, a centurion, Rome, the one where I took the little trailer from just now, a famous movie called Ben-Hur, it won lots of
You're starting to break up.
Oscars. The Eagle, The Fall of the Roman Empire, Cleopatra, because it deals with, she's of course Egyptian gladiator. Life of Brian is a comedy. There's Ben-Hur again. I, Claudius. Oh, am I? Okay. I, Claudius, Julius Caesar, Robe, and more. You can see that there are quite a few. Next, we will go to National Geographic. This one's 5 minutes. I'll copy and paste it in the chat in case, but it's only a 5-minute one. And then we will do kind of a quick wrap up. And this is from National Geographic. Let's see if it crosses over. And I'll play it on my share as well. Again, overview of ancient Rome.
Watch the NBA playoffs live on a variety of networks with YouTube TV.
You're clearly someone who takes care of yourself, so why wait to screen for colon cancer? Because when caught in early stages, it...
The story of ancient Rome is a story of evolution, of how a civilization's ability to adapt and dominate can lead to its survival for over 1,000 years. Rome began as a small village on central Italy's Tiber River. In the coming centuries, it grew into an empire that stretched from the North Atlantic all the way to the Persian Gulf. During this transformation, Rome displayed a political, military, and cultural prowess that enabled it to become a superpower and helped shape what would become known as Western civilization. The lifespan of ancient Rome can be divided into 3 major periods: the regal, the republican, and the imperial. During the regal period, Rome was monarchical and ruled by a succession of about 7 kings. Rome's first king, according to legend, was a man named Romulus. He and his twin brother Remus are said to have founded Rome in 753 BC. In 509 BC, Rome adopted a republican system of governance in which the state was primarily ruled by 2 annually elected representatives called praetors, who were later called consuls. One of them became a famous general and dictator, Julius Caesar. The imperial period followed. It was characterized by the rise of the Roman Empire and notorious leaders such as Octavian, Rome's first emperor, who ushered in an era of peace, and Nero, who, some scholars believe, was Rome's cruelest emperor. Rome's focus and pride in its military was vital to the civilization's growth, and this ethos was evident as early as the regal period, when Rome was only a small village. Still, Rome slowly conquered and annexed neighboring peoples. This slow and steady expansion eventually led to the Romans' domination of the Italian peninsula and the entire Mediterranean Sea, where they conquered the Greeks, Egyptians, and Carthaginians. Military conquests would later help Rome conquer lands as far away as Britain and Iraq. This massive scale and growing populace necessitated advancements in Roman engineering. Aqueducts were constructed, which increased the public's access to water, helped improve public health, and paved the way for Rome's famed bathhouses. A 50,000-mile-long road system was built as well. While made originally for the military, it facilitated the movement of people and ideas throughout the empire. This transmission of ideas and increased contact with diverse cultures also enabled other aspects of Roman culture to evolve. A key to Rome's success and longevity was the empire's inclusion of cultures from the lands they conquered. From the nearby land of Latium, Rome acquired the Latin language, which became the empire's official language and the ancestor to Europe's Romance languages. Romans also adopted cultural aspects from the ancient state of Etruria, including their religion, alphabet, and the spectacle of gladiator combat. However, no other civilization influenced the Romans as much as the ancient Greeks. Their influence is probably most apparent in Rome's art and architecture. Upper-class Romans commissioned paintings and sculptures to imitate Greek art. Greek architectural styles, such as columns, were implemented in Roman structures, such as the Pantheon and Colosseum. One cultural shift in particular that resonated throughout the empire was the rise of Christianity. Originating in the Middle East, the religion found a strong advocate in Constantine I, the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. He enabled Rome's transition into a Christian state and encouraged the religion to spread across Europe. By the 4th century, after a lifespan of over a millennium, the Roman Empire declined. Factors including political corruption, economic crises, and class conflict led to the empire's decay from within, while invasions and other military threats caused it to break down from outside. Rome's ability to incorporate diverse cultures, dominate rivals, and adapt political systems to the needs of its people are all lessons to be learned for time eternal.
Okay, that was a short one, but it does give a really great summary of Roman times. And there's one more before we head out, and it's a 3D view of ancient Rome. And here we go.
I'm with Dr. Bernie Frischer, the creator of Rome Reborn. It's a beautiful day, and we're flying low over the Tiber River.
This is Rome in the year 320 CE. You see this big plaza, that's the so-called Circus Flaminius, beyond which is a theater, the Theater of Marcellus, and to the left is the Capitoline Hill.
And now we're approaching a large stadium, a place for sporting events.
This is the Circus Maximus, used for the chariot races, among other things. It also was used for parades, for example, the Triumphal Parade. It could seat up to, we think, 250,000 people. It was quite a big complex.
And there's an island in the middle around which the chariots would race. You can see right in the middle of that the large obelisk.
This is one of the first two very tall obelisks brought from Egypt to Rome by the first emperor, Augustus. It symbolized to the Egyptians, and the Romans knew this, a sunbeam. And the Romans thought this was appropriate for the circus because the circus itself had a temple of the sun god.
And this temple to the sun is placed directly across from the imperial box. And just to the left of the stadium is the palace.
The great imperial palace. At the end of the Circus Maximus is a triumphal arch. We know that was dedicated to the Emperor Titus and celebrated his victory over the province of Judea. The reason that there's a triumphal arch of Titus here is that the parade known as the triumphal procession went through the Circus Maximus. And all along the triumphal procession, there were temples, triumphal arches, and other monuments.
And aligned with the Arch of Titus, we can see in the distance one of the great bath complexes of ancient Rome.
That's the baths of Caracalla. Now we're looking at the Celian Hill. You can see the Claudian Aqueduct in the valley between the Celian Hill and to our left, the Palatine Hill. You see a plume of smoke going up from the imperial bath complex on the Palatine Hill. To our right, we're passing by a great complex, a garden in the middle of which is a temple. And that's the temple of the divine Claudius. Claudius was made a god after his death, and Nero incorporated this piece of land into the Golden House, which covered 120 acres.
What I find so fascinating is that so much of the ancient architecture that I associate with Rome in the Colosseum district is really a reaction against Nero, as a reaction against his excesses.
Everywhere you look, the selfishly expropriated public land under Nero was given back to the public, and the public was very happy. These are all public facilities. So think of the Colosseum. Beyond that, we have some smoke coming out. Those are baths, the baths of Trajan. It's open to the public. In front of that is a smaller bath complex, the baths of Titus.
We're now flying just over the Arch of Constantine, which is another landmark that survives into the modern era.
Yes, another triumphal arch. In front of that, you see that cone. That's the Metasoudons, a great fountain. And to the right is the Flavian Amphitheater, also known as the Colosseum. But you can see why it was called the Colosseum in the Middle Ages, not in antiquity, because of that enormous 100-foot tall bronze statue, which is a statue of the sun god. Now, that was originally a statue of Nero. After his death, Vespasian had the head taken off and had it converted to a statue of the sun god. We see just beyond the second Arch of Titus in the city.
And just to the right of that, the Basilica of Maxentius and Constantine.
Yes.
And these are all structures that remain. And now we're just veering off to the left. And at the top of the hill is the palace. We're seeing it from the other side.
Yeah, this is the palace on top of the Palatine. Because the emperors lived up there, the word palace became synonymous with where a leader would live. We're turning now away from the palace and looking over toward the Roman Forum.
In the ancient era, the Forum was a place for oratory. It was a place for government.
In the Republic, yes, it was a place for meetings of the assembly as well as the Senate. The Senate had its own building, but the people would assemble in front of the speaker's rostra or platform to listen to their leaders explain policy, propose laws, and debate each other when they were running for public office.
We seem to be flying just through the smoke of the Temple of Vesta.
The Temple of Vesta, famous for its eternal flame, and beyond that is the Triple Arch of Augustus. It celebrates the restoration by the Parthians in modern-day Iran of military standards. Interestingly enough, we're looking now at a rostra, a speaker's platform right ahead of us. That's a late antique rostra dating to the end of the 3rd century AD.
But we can see the original just a little further on.
Yes, bookending the Forum Plaza at the other end is another rostra, the Augustan rostra, originally built by Julius Caesar.
And in between the rostra, there's this beautiful equestrian sculpture.
This was actually the early 3rd century AD Emperor Septimius Severus, and we know about the statue being there both archaeologically from the remains of the base, but also also from coins that illustrate it.
We're surrounded by public buildings and by temples.
We can see over to the right the Temple of Castor and Pollux. Straight ahead is the Temple of the Divine Julius Caesar. If you look closely, you can see the cult statue inside. We know about that from a coin that illustrates it. Caesar was shown as an augur, a priest. Up in the pediment of the temple, you see a star. It illustrates the comet that was seen in the sky over Rome in the summer after Caesar's assassination.
We're surrounded by columns, and these were honorary columns.
Yes, there's in front of the law court known as the Basilica Julia, and we know from Pliny that to portray a human on top of a column was in effect to make him a god or make him godlike. What we see now in front of us is one of the two Trajanic reliefs that, interestingly enough, in their backgrounds illustrates the Roman Forum as it appeared in the time of the emperors Trajan and Hadrian. A lot of people are surprised to see that set up here on the Forum Plaza. That's actually where they were found at the end of the 19th century.
But now they're in the Senate.
They were moved there in the 20th century to protect them from the elements.
When you go into the Senate to see them, you don't see these blues, you don't see those yellows, you don't see these greens. Almost all Roman sculpture was painted.
And this is one of the great breakthroughs of the last 10 years or so, development of a number of non-invasive techniques to detect color, even little traces of pigment left on the surface of white marble. Now we're seeing the so-called statue of Phocas. It's called the statue of Phocas because it was excavated at the beginning of the 19th century, and they found an inscription to the Byzantine Emperor Phocas. But we think that Phocas's inscription was added on top of an older inscription to the Tetrarch Diocletian, and he is therefore the figure shown on top of the column.
We're now looking up the hill that leads to the Capitoline.
Masking the hill is the tabularium, or the state record office in the background. In front of it are three temples. To the left, the Temple of Saturn. In the center, the Temple of Vespasian and Titus, worshipped as gods after their deaths. And then to the right, the Temple of Concordia that celebrated the harmony between the social classes of Rome. And then during the empire, it symbolized the harmony between the imperial family and the Roman Senate. We're passing over the Augustan rostra now, and just to the right is the Arch of Septimius Severus. He left a very big mark in the Forum.
And his arch, even today, overshadows so much of the Forum.
Yes, it's very well preserved.
Let's move now to the imperial fora. As opposed to the Roman Forum, these are fora that individual emperors built to honor their own rule.
Fora is the plural of forum, so the Roman forum and the imperial fora. Starting from the time of Julius Caesar, it was recognized that the old Roman forum was too crowded. If you were an emperor and you wanted to honor your favorite god, or eventually after you died have a temple to yourself, you needed to build a new public space. Where better to do that than adjacent to the old Roman forum? So Julius Caesar's forum, which we're now over, uses the backside of the Senate as a part and parcel of this new Forum Iulium, the Forum of Julius Caesar, which is dominated at the end of its main axis by the temple of Venus Genetrix, his favorite goddess. The other emperors followed suit. So across the way is the Forum of Augustus, dominated by the temple of his favorite god, the god Mars, the war god.
The temple is actually flanked by two hemicycles.
Yes, and in those hemicycles were niches with some of Rome's leading historic figures and also the Julian ancestors of Augustus, going all the way back to Aeneas.
You can see other imperial fora that are squeezed in, especially the transitorium.
Yeah, the transitorium is also called the Forum of Nerva. It's basically just a monumentalization of the Argoletum, the street that runs next to the Senate House into the Roman Forum, and then going in the other direction to the east, up into the Suburra, the slummy part of Rome filled with tenements where lots of people lived.
But if the transitorium is squeezed in, you would never say that about the Forum of Trajan.
No, the last one of these imperial fora is the Forum of Trajan. It's the biggest by far. It's fairly well preserved. At the end of it is the Temple of the Divine Trajan. It was built after Trajan died, but he actually started building this while he was still alive. So in front of the temple is the column of Trajan that celebrates his two victories over the Dacians, the people in modern-day Romania. And flanking the column are two libraries. In front of the libraries in the column is a bigger building, the Basilica Ulpia, which probably served as a law court and had some other functions. It was a big multi-purpose space.
Just coming into view is one of the most famous extant Roman monuments, the Pantheon.
Now we're flying to the northern campus Martius, which was filled with funerary monuments, temples, ustrini, places where emperors' bodies were cremated, columns like the column of Marcus Aurelius.
And the first Roman emperor built his own mausoleum, the Mausoleum of Augustus.
We can see this round structure at the northernmost part of the campus Martius.
Now we've just swung around, so we've got a great view of the Pantheon.
We can really see the Pantheon. We have this hypothetical arch that a lot of people think was in front of the Pantheon, and to its left was the most prestigious shopping center of Rome, Rome, the Saepta Iulia, and next to that is this great Egyptian temple of the goddess Isis. You can see 2 obelisks.
So what we're seeing is a city that is filled with monuments to Roman rulers, monuments that celebrate their achievements, their military victory, the wealth that they brought to the city.
Yes, but now as we turn and go back to the south and the southern part of the campus marshes, we see that these emperors were not only selfish, but they created a lot of public facilities and built up their popularity that way. So we've just been flying through the entertainment part of the city here.
When you walk through Rome now, this city that's so layered with history, it's sometimes difficult to reconstruct in your mind how these ancient monuments fit together. This recreation provides such rich detail. It allows us to see the city literally as if we had traveled back to the 4th century.
Okay, so that particular drone travelogue kind of gives you a glimpse of the years and the rules and how the buildings started to get together, and that we still have some of those buildings remain. Many were destroyed with battle and with wear and tear. So
Love to
have
go.
a good weekend. Check Google Classroom. Make sure you get your chapter 3 about the Romans read. I did post the quiz, the metaphor, and the discussion question. We won't meet Monday, Memorial Day, plus my birthday. And then we'll see you back on Wednesday. I also will probably post material about Project One, specifics about the paper and about the PowerPoint. Most of you have already posted a document up there and your slides. So have a good weekend and thanks for coming.
Yep.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good
Bye-bye.
birthday.